Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar with Skyportz. My name is Emily, and I am the Senior Campaign Lead here at Birchal. And just before I introduce Clem, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are beaming to you from today. Birchal is based on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and we'd like to pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. So without further ado, today I am joined by Clem from Skyportz. You might recognize him from previous campaigns that have been on the Birchal platform. So Birchal's working with Clem and the Skyportz team on an upcoming crowdsourced funding offer. A few of you may not be familiar with crowdsourced funding or CSF. It's also known as equity crowdfunding. So it's a relatively new form of fundraising here in Australia that kicked off in 2018, and it allows startups and small businesses to raise capital from a large number of smaller or retail investors, as well as wholesale and sophisticated investors through an online platform such as Birchal. So instead of seeking funding from traditional sources such as banks or venture capitalists, companies can turn to the general public and often, in most cases, their communities to raise money in exchange for equity in business. So Birchal Financial Services, which is us, will be the licensed intermediary for the offer. And I'd just like to remind everybody that the information and discussion in this webinar is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as advice or a recommendation to invest. So please do your own research and always consider the offer document and general CSF risk warning before investing. If you need any more information, you can head over to birchal.com and you can reach out to us or Clem at any time you need. So the way today's presentation is going to run, Clem is going to take us through a fantastic presentation, which will run for around about 15 minutes, all about Skyportz, where they've come from, what they're looking to do with this capital raise, and then we'll switch over to a Q&A session. So if you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see a little Q&A bubble. So if you've got any questions during today's session, please pop it in the Q&A box as we go along, and we'll answer those during the Q&A time at the end. We're also recording today's session, so if you need to jump off early at any point, we will send it through to you, and you will also be able to rehash it if you need. Without further ado, I will hand over to Clem. Take it away.
Thanks, Emily. Great to be here today to go through what we've been up to and what our plans are. This equity crowdfunding through the Birchal platform has been a fantastic way for us to expand our business and to try to achieve what we're trying to achieve. And this is it's an ASIC regulated fundraiser. It's very different to GoFundMe type campaigns. It's there's a lot of legals around it and a lot of regulation, and we're working through those to get a complying offer document, which will have all the details next week. And but for today, it's more about a broader overview. That said, in terms of investment, I'd love to have you on board. I think we've got about 500 investors so far, and I know many of you are watching today. And through the course of the EOI, we've got well over 500 new expressions of interest, which is very exciting to have a whole lot more people in our community supporting us and following our journey. So thank you all for your interest. I will say from the outset, this is a speculative investment. I called it a moonshot when I first started, and back then it really was. There's a lot of uncertainty in terms of whether the aircraft are going to actually become available, and whether this industry can actually take off. And in the course of today, hopefully I'll show you that we are much more confident than we were 5 years ago, and that the pieces are falling into place, and much more so than 5 years ago, and even in the last 12 months or so, as evidenced by the number of vertiport competitors around the world. We've got limited competition in Australia, there's dozens of vertiport companies setting up around the world. So that sort of points to me that we are on the right track, that this is something which the global industry sees as an essential piece of the puzzle. But it is speculative, and please don't invest if you're not aware of that. Read the warnings. The industry is there's various estimates as to what the industry is worth globally, looking at $1.5 trillion in the next 20 years. Within Australia, we've had Nexa Capital assess just the eastern seaboard of Australia at $21 billion over the next 20 years or so. So the opportunities are enormous if it comes off, but there are still some things that have to fall into place, and this is what I want to make sure that everybody's aware of before you invest. And also the fact that investments in startups such as this is, you're not going to get a dividend every year. This is something where we're trying to create value, and we're trying to create an exit situation at some point in the future, and potentially with a much bigger investor coming in. And certainly over the course of the last year or so, we've been approached by bigger funds to talk about what we're doing. The sort of funds that invest in toll roads and things like that, and in the hundreds of millions of dollars. I think the situation at the moment with these funds is that they're very interested, but it's still a little early for them because the aircraft aren't yet flying, and the business cases aren't yet certain. So the good news for people who share our optimism is that it's an opportunity for retail investors to get on board before it becomes a much more certain thing. And that's what we're trying to do, is to assemble the pieces to make it make sense, so that these bigger investors will come in and actually build what we're proposing. So, this fund is not about actually building vertiports. We would need hundreds of millions of dollars to be building vertiports. This is a smaller raise that will keep our team going to keep putting those pieces of the puzzle together. So I hope I haven't talked too many of you out of investing with all my caveats and warnings, but I did want to just make those comments early on. So in terms of the industry, many of you have been following us for a while, but some of you haven't, and a lot of people still think that this is a bit of a fantasy. These are the sort of images that have been around for years. This dream of flight that's been around for decades, really. And a lot of people still have this sort of view that this is all science fiction and it's never going to happen. And that's certainly not the case. And I suppose it really started picking up steam probably around 2018, 2019, when Wilbur Air really started pushing for setting up some test cities. And this is how I got involved. I was a planning consultant for microflight helicopters in Melbourne, and we were dealing with government on the landing pad there on the river, which is the design behind me is that's our design to replace what's there, and we hope the government will take us up on that. But back in 2018, Uber came to town to look at Melbourne as a potential test or launch city after Dallas and LA for their Uber Air concept. And that's where Skyportz started, because we set Skyportz up really to get a seat at the table, which worked. So we got invited over to Washington for the announcement, and Victorian government went there as well. And it was all very exciting. And then it all fell in a heap. So it was Uber had this blast of publicity, and who would have thought that an app that doesn't make money wouldn't be the best vehicle for creating a whole new revolution in aviation. And to their credit, they did get the ball rolling. There's some really clever people who were part of that Uber Air team who have moved on to other parts of the industry. But that Uber Air thing only lasted a short time, and my view is that it was there were parts of what they were doing which were unhelpful. They were big visionaries, and they were unrealistic about the progress. So they were talking about having 1,000 air taxis flying around Melbourne, and that basically scared people. And I'll come to community license in a moment, but that wasn't helpful. And I think the industry now is a bit more measured, and while there's a lot of promotion out there because everybody's trying to raise money, particularly in the aircraft space, I think people are a lot more measured about how it's actually going to work. And And I think the reality is we're not going to see, suddenly have a city with 1,000 aircraft flying around. We'll see an existing helicopter service replaced with a clean, green, quieter electric air taxi to replace a helicopter, and then it will progress from there. So it'll be a progression. So all we're really talking about is replacing one form of technology with another, and then moving from the moving from there to creating new landing sites to create more potential for these cleaner, greener aircraft. And really, it comes down to them being accepted by the community because they're quieter and more accessible and affordable for everybody. Then I think the community license will come, and then we'll see the potential to activate vertiport sites, which will then see what's an evolution become a revolution. And that's what we're trying to do. So in terms of where we're at now, the Uber's no longer part of it, as I've said, but there has been an enormous amount of money put into the front-running aircraft. So they say it takes about $1 billion to get a new aircraft into commercial certification, and there's about 1,000 aircraft in development at the moment. So most of those will fail because they won't get the funding to get through to the other end. But we're now at the point where there's a handful of the front runners who are very close to getting through to commercial certification. And so the two front runners are Joby and Archer, who are both US based. The aircraft in this picture here is the Archer Midnight aircraft. And these two aircraft are likely to be certified within the next year or two, we expect. That's not something I can control, and that's one of the uncertainties for our businesses. We don't have a product yet. We're waiting for the aircraft, but all the signs are that these aircraft are already flying. You can go onto YouTube and you can see them. They're flying, but to fly with commercial passengers is an extremely high standard of safety. So it is going to take a little bit more time. Here are some of the different models that are in development, and there's different sort of concepts out there. It's a bit like Wright Brothers days, really, where everybody's sort of coming up with starting from scratch with brand new designs, and the designs that seem to be making the most progress are the ones that have shaped like a plane, but they have tilting rotors that will enable the aircraft to lift up and then travel horizontally on a wing. When you've got a wing involved, then it's much more energy efficient, and that's one of the limitations of these aircraft is battery life, which is ever improving, but it is still an issue. So I think we'll see these aircraft, such as the one on the left, that the Archer, will be the shape that generally becomes the standard. The one on the top right there is the volocopter. Now that's a multi-rotor. It's a very relatively inexpensive aircraft, but it's very limited because it doesn't have a wing incorporated, so it uses a lot of energy, so it's got a very short range. We're expecting them to be flying at the Paris Olympics in the next few months, so that's probably where you'll next see that one, is doing demonstration flights for the Olympics. The one at the bottom right is the EHang. That's a Chinese version, and that's fully autonomous. So there's no pilot in there. You get in there, it's just like a big drone, and you get flown around in it. And all these aircraft are being designed to be flown autonomously in the future, but I think the industry will start with a pilot because that's what the community will want as that added layer of safety. But ultimately, looking forward 20 or 30 years, we'll be flying on these aircraft without pilots, and that will be the most safe way in which to travel. So these pictures are from the Paris Air Show. We did a Skyportz presentation at the air show last year, and very exciting to actually see these aircraft, actually there, and these are the actual models that are out there flying. As far as Australia goes, we are in an interesting position that we're well placed, I think, with our ecosystem, our policy support, and our regulators. but we don't have a big local industry in developing aircraft. So of those 1,000 aircrafts in development, there's one being developed in Australia. So this is a team called AMSL Aero, and they're based in Bankstown in Sydney. They're doing some great stuff. They've got quite a lot of investment. They've got, I think the military are investing in them as an air ambulance for battlefields. Care Flight have got orders in for using them as an air ambulance. And they're being quite innovative, exploring hydrogen as a power source, which will also give them a much longer range, which they think will put them ahead of the front runners when they get approved. But this aircraft won't be one of the first to be flying, and this is why we've been building our relationships internationally with the OEMs that are developing aircraft that are more likely to be in the air sooner. As far as the launch cities goes, Australia isn't on the map, and this is an issue in that if this does take off globally, and there's a lot of people like me around the world who believe it is going to, then there will be a lag in actually getting our hands on aircraft, because if it's all working well, everybody's going to want the aircraft, and there'll be limitations to how many can be produced. So that'll be might be a short slump in the progression of the industry while the aircraft start getting produced at scale. Once the factories already being set up, Joby and Archer are both getting their factories set up. So I don't think if there is a slump, it'll be temporary, and then I think we'll see these aircraft being developed at scale. So in Australia, we're trying to get on the map in terms of getting aircraft, and I'll come to a new initiative which we're just going to be launching soon to try to encourage those aircraft to come into Australia. So in terms of what we can do to attract the industry, there's a number of different things we need to do, and which we're already doing. So state government support is going to be very important, and New South Wales, Victoria, and Queensland are all actively out there chasing this industry. If you go onto the Invest Victoria website, they've got a pitch there for the industry to come here and start manufacturing your aircraft. And this isn't all just about charging people to travel in an aircraft. There's going to be a massive industry that sits behind and supports this industry, and huge opportunities for the first movers. And as an ex-politician, it frustrates the hell out of me that I can see that we should be moving faster on this, because if we create an ecosystem where the aircraft are attracted because we've got somewhere where they can come in and fly without a lot of impediments, then they're going to see the industry investment come into those places, and that's the opportunity that's out there. And look, there are Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland are all actively preparing their states to try to attract this investment. I don't think they're doing enough yet, and that's part of the job that I've sort of set myself with Skyportz is lobbying the government, being an industry advocate, and talking up what is required. And in my view, it's quite simple what's required. It's planning scheme changes to enable new vertiports. But anyway, good on all these governments for doing the work that they're doing so far. Federal government support is also there, and look, all the support that's out there from a policy perspective is hugely important, because it doesn't matter how good the idea is, if you haven't got policy support for change, a revolution as big as this, it's not going to happen. So I'm not out there trying to convince governments and air regulators and others this is a great idea I've just thought of. Let's do advanced air mobility. This is already happening and has been happening for some time. So that's what also gives me confidence that this is an industry where it is going to take off, as long as a few more pieces of the puzzle fall into place. But from a policy perspective, we're in a really solid place. So federal government, through the Department of Infrastructure and Transport, has released a couple of different roadmaps, and you can see those online. And CASA, our regulator, is basically preparing the skies for this, and not just for piloted, but also unpiloted aviation into the future. So they've got a long-term timeline, and they've got a team of people working on it. And I've heard from Pip Spence, who is the head of CASA, that in the next week or two there will be vertiport guidelines released by CASA, which will provide more guidance as to where we'll be able to put vertiports. And this is huge for Skyportz. I mean, this is what our business is all about. And so I really hope that that document gets released in the next couple of weeks, because obviously it helps provide some comfort to potential investors. But that information came from a public update from CASA, which I'm happy to send through to you if you're interested. Money has also been put in by the federal government for funds to create, to advance the industry. And there's also academics such as the Swinburne University in Victoria, which is establishing a CRC, which is a Commonwealth Research Centre for Advanced Air Mobility. So they're collecting together the industry partners at the moment, and they'll be pitching to the government for this CRC, which is huge. I mean, this is like a significant pool of money that will go into advancing the industry, and it brings academia along, so universities are part of it as well as industry, and so we'll be part of that. And it means that if we're doing research on vertiports, for example, we get to tap into the best of the best in terms of the technical and academic aspects of what we need to do with the support of government. So that's another angle which we'll be pursuing in the coming year or so. Now, I woke up this morning, I thought, this is amazing, what great timing. This morning, this report was released from the peak body, which is the Australian Association for Uncrewed Systems. And this is a working group that I chair, and there's the industry leaders. There's about a dozen of us, I suppose, who have been working on this document for probably a year or two now, led by Natasha Santha from LEK and Reece Clothier, who's the president of the association, and they've done a fantastic job in doing this report. And the good thing about this report is that it's a current report, and it sets out the vision and the roadmap. So if you're interested in the timelines, and as I said, this is not going to be a business whereby you're getting dividends from us running an air taxi system next year. It is going to be a progression, but this document is a great one to give you a real perspective on what those timelines will be and what the opportunities will be. But ultimately, we hope that we'll have a much bigger investor that comes in to take on and potentially take over the work that we've been doing in assembling the pieces of the puzzle. So these sort of documents are all hugely important, both for existing investors to pat themselves on the back and say, gee, it was good we invested a few years back, because it's all coming to fruition. And for those who are considering investing, it does provide a level of certainty. But as I said, there are still a few things that need to fall into place for this to happen. Helicopter operators are going to be hugely important, and existing charter operators, because they're going to be the ones who will be operating these aircraft. So we've been working very closely with these companies such as Microflight Helicopters, Sydney Seaplanes. They've already got orders in with aircraft. They want to start operating, and they want destinations. So if all they're doing is flying from their helipad to an airport, then it's not a revolution. They want to be able to tell their clients, yeah, you want to go to Chadstone Shopping Centre? Yes, we can land there. We've got a vertiport on the top of the car park there. The property industry is going to be hugely important as well. Because they'll be providing these potential sites, and industrial commercial property, I think, will be the lower hanging fruit for us to start with. So we're not talking about landing on city rooftops anytime soon. I've just seen the time there. We're almost through time, Emily. I've been
You can take as
I'll,
much time as you like, Clem. Keep going.
I'll keep going. If you have to go, we're recording this, so you can get the recording and catch up if you do have to go. But I'm sorry, I have been rabbiting on a bit. I get a bit excited, Emily. I'm sorry. It's
I'm
there's
glad
so
you're
much more to
excited.
talk
It is
about.
exciting. No, keep going. We've got plenty
Uh,
of time.
all right then. So in terms of the what is the holdup? So once you're convinced here this is happening and there is support, why isn't it already happening? So yeah, the first issue obviously is the aircraft. So we're waiting for the aircraft, and that's likely to be resolved relatively soon. But then what I need to see in terms of the new vertiports, we need the state planning schemes. Our state governments and local governments need to actually, it's quite simple. They just need to tweak their planning schemes to enable a vertiport as a discretionary use. At the moment, to get a helicopter permit, I used to be a planning lawyer, and getting a heliport in anywhere is hugely difficult. And mainly because of the imposts on the environment around you. So, in general terms, in Victoria, if you're within 500 meters of a sensitive use, such as a school or a residence, then you're going to have a lot of trouble getting a helipad there. So generally, sort of means that you can't, in an urban environment, very difficult to get approval. So the premise for Skyportz is that these aircraft are going to be much quieter. They're going to be more affordable for more people, and they're going to be able to be operated in a way that's much cleaner for the environment. And all these things will help to make them more acceptable in locations where you wouldn't put a heliport. So we need the state governments to create a new land use, which is vertiport as opposed to heliport. And this is, as I said, frustrates the hell out of me as a former politician that this doesn't even cost anything, and it would be a world first. The first state that does this, I think, will see certainly our interest and also global interest, I think, coming to them. The next one, which is hugely important, is community license. And politicians won't, to some extent they will lead from the front, but if it's looking like they're getting a backlash, then they'll be backpedaling very fast. So if the community doesn't want this to happen, it won't happen, and that's one of our biggest risks, I suppose, is the having these aircraft arrive and people saying, well, no, I don't want these. I don't want to have these landing, on my local shopping centre or at my local Bunnings store or whatever. So this is a risk, and that's the job that that me and others in the industry, where and all around the world, at every conference I speak at, this is a topic that comes up all the time, and we're aware that we need to convince the community that these are going to be things which can make a big difference to your life, not going to be a huge impost on your life. They're not just going to be toys for rich people to fly around in as helicopters are perceived, and they're going to be something that can actually revolutionize the way we move people and goods around. So it is a big job, and when Uber came in, they didn't really they went to the look 30 years down the path, but we need to look a few years down the path to really bring the community along. So we actually need to be in the position where these aircraft start. People see them, they say, oh, well, they're much quieter than helicopters, and they find out a bit about them, and they're flying from helipads and airports and things and in tourism uses. And we need the community to actually be saying, well, why can't I take one of these aircraft from somewhere near my house? Why do I need to go to an airport or a heliport to do this? And that's when I think when the community is calling for it, that's when it will happen. And if you look at the situation with the Uber cars, yeah, when they started, they were illegal, and they got community license very quickly because people wanted to use them. They were better, they were cheaper, they were faster than conventional taxis, and the community just used them, and it was the politicians bent towards what the community wanted. That's a very different situation to here, and this is, I think, probably why one of the reasons why Uber didn't really stay in it for the long haul is unlike cars on the road, you can't just start putting a whole lot of aircraft in the sky and then hope for regulations to change. So it's a much more considered approach, but still the concept is still valid that you need that community license. And then finally, showing a pathway to establish a network, and that's part of what we're doing is showing that if the aircraft come here, we've got property partners who want to be part of this. They want to provide destinations, and for property owners, it's a bit of a no-brainer for them because they can't use their properties for aviation at the moment. And I come along and say, well, can I use your rooftop for aviation or your car park or whatever? And it'll be a new income stream for you, or a new service that will help attract residents or attract people to your shopping centre. And it makes sense. It's okay. I can't use it for aviation at the moment. You're offering to do it for me, and that's how we're getting these options. Is that we don't charge anything for the options. Originally, we did, and it would be great to be getting money coming in for people paying for those for the work that we're doing, but in our view, it's better to get as many sites as possible where we have that first right, because then it means we're setting it up for a much bigger play when a big investor comes in and actually wants to start building. We'll have those sites that we know that not all of them will be suitable. We haven't done detailed assessments on all of them, but we know that we have willing property partners, and we can map out where are the best locations, work out whether they're suitable, and then proceed to building. So on our website, we've got a locator map, which is an active map. You can, if you're a property owner, you can put in your property, and it comes up as a pin on the map. And this is a great visual thing for both potential investors and also for when we're trying to sort of build the whole ecosystem. Is if someone comes to me and says, "Look, I'm really interested in what can you do in Brisbane?" I can pinch in to this map, and we can see the locations of where we've got property partners. So, and this is something which we're potentially looking at doing globally. So. I'm not sort of pushing this too hard because it's our focus is Australia, but whenever we're approached by overseas companies, we do float out there the concept that we would be interested in licensing the Skyportz brand and IP in our systems to do what I've been doing here in Australia in other markets. So we're talking to some people in the Middle East and in India and China at the moment. Nothing to report there yet, but and there is a lot of competition globally, but there is potential that this could be something that where we can license what we're doing internationally to try to sort of get a much capture more of the market. But because I think there is a window that's rapidly closing. There are vertiport companies everywhere that are setting up to try to sort of cash in on not cash in, try to build on the ideas that I'm talking about here. So just to conclude, here are some of the designs. We've got a fantastic team of consultants who are working with us to help create a team that's ready to move when the industry catches up and the investment's there to actually build stuff. So Contreras Earl Architecture, they are based in Queensland. Rafael Contreras there is an ex-Zaha Hadid architect, and he was the lead designer on the Beijing airport, and he does all these amazingly beautiful designs, which are aluminium construction, monocoque construction, and these are the sort of things which I think we'll see in public spaces, and these sort of central city vertiports are likely to be built and run by governments, I imagine. But the space where where and that's a mini airport at Caravan Park, a business park in Victoria. But I think where we're the space where I think we can add value is not so much in the big, amazing architecture vertiports. Where I think we can add the most value is just the simple set down and pick up sites, so that there are destinations you can go to. And to that end, we are working with Swinburne at the moment to try to develop some landing surfaces that can be put in very economically to if a property partner says, well, yeah, we want to have a vertiport here, and what does that involve? And it doesn't necessarily involve having a really amazing building and all the charging facilities and things. There will be great scope just to have a safe spot that an aircraft can drop down, pick up, and drop off people. And then just finally, this is something which we haven't announced yet, and it's a bonus for those who have invested previously. We were looking at the idea of an electric airline for Australia, and we settled on the name Wilbur Air after Wilbur Wright, and got all the domains and set up the company there. And while we're potentially looking at this as a totally separate company, we've decided to make it a fully owned subsidiary of Skyportz. So that means anybody who invests in Skyportz is also holds equity in this potential future airline. So this is really sort of again another moonshot off in another direction, but building on what we're doing with the vertiports. And the idea behind this came from a meeting with Macquarie Capital, where they were interested in the idea of building the vertiports, but they wanted to know that there was aircraft to use them, and we could get operators and everything else. So the idea with this is that we're working to try to get options on aircraft that will operate under the Wilbur Air brand, and we're talking to charter operators, helicopter operators who would be the operators of the aircraft, all operating under the one Wilbur Air brand. That could be drone freight, it could be passenger freight, and lots of different aircraft. So this aircraft here is the Electra Aero, which is it's a short takeoff and landing aircraft. Now we've got the rights to the first 100 of those in Australia, and we'll be doing a press release on that in the next day or two. We've also working with a number of other of the aircraft to try to get options on their aircraft. The issue we've got with it at the moment is that most of these, the Joby and Archer, the front runners, they require deposits on aircraft to get in their production queue, and that's not something that we have the funds to do, to be putting money into just holding deposits on aircraft. So what we're doing is offering these OEMs something more than money. We're saying, well, we're actually offering a whole ecosystem that will be ready to operate. We've got the landing sites to create the business cases. We've got operators who want to fly them, and we've got Wilbur Air, which could end up being a booking platform that Skyportz runs to operate from our vertiports. So there's still a way to go with this idea, but it is one where I think there's going to be great potential in the future. And as I said, anyone who invests in Skyportz will also be a part owner of Australia's first electric airline. So, or maybe not Australia's first. There is electric aircraft in development at the moment, but in terms of an airline which is designed for having multiple different aircraft, all focused around electric aviation, I think it is a first. So that sort of covers, I think, a bit about where we're at. I've gone a bit over time, but not too much. So I'm really interested though I'll stop sharing my screen. I'm really interested in what questions that's thrown up, Emily, because I know there'll be heaps of questions, and I'll happily answer them as I can. If I don't get to your questions, I'm very easily found, so you'll all be getting my emails and things, and please just respond, and either directly or I think once the offer opens, there's a facility on the virtual platform for discussion as well. So feel free to use that as well.
Yeah, right. And there's been plenty of questions. Thank you so much for that presentation. It was so in-depth and really exciting to hear about the future for aero transport in Australia. I think it's huge and such an exciting space to be in. So one of the first questions we've had is Skyportz interested in UAV cargo transportation?
Yes. Well, yes and no. I don't. I think the smaller delivery drones, I think, will be very difficult to. I think they're a separate thing, which I don't think would benefit from the vertiport networks that we're developing. They're already operating. Google's been operating their wing delivery service in Canberra and now Brisbane for some years now. So you can order a donut or a coffee, but they don't charge for that. So they're building up their capacity and their product, and I think it's going to be very hard if you're spending $5 on a coffee to be charging $30 for a delivery of that coffee. So I see the heavy lifting drones as being something where there is huge potential. Because the vertiports are going to be easiest to get in places such as industrial and commercial areas, I think there's great scope for industrial developers to develop sites where they have a vertiport as a service that they provide for their potential tenants. So they attract somebody. Bunnings comes into their site because they've got a vertiport there. And so in that sense, that then leaves the option open for both being a mini park and ride airport for people who want to be traveling, instead of going to an airport, you're going to your local Bunnings store where you can park and get in an aircraft. But also for heavy lifting drones, business to business, I think that's where we'll see where you can really add some value, where you can move a few hundred kilos of stock. So if you've got one Bunnings runs out of stock of something, they can quickly transfer to another site. So the short answer is yes, and I'm actually just finalising an agreement which hopefully I'll be able to tell you about in the next week or so, with a Swiss company that's developing a two-person autonomous drone or air taxi, but they will start with being a freight moving vehicle, because that will give them the hours to prove that they're safe enough to put people in them. So, and that's the intersection that will happen. We'll have piloted air taxis, and delivery drones will be a parallel industry for some time. And I think what will happen is that the delivery drones will get so big that they'll get to the point where they can carry people, and once they're proven to be safe enough, then the two streams converge, and you have aircraft that can carry people, and they don't have pilots on board.
Fantastic. So I know there's been a few questions around similar themes. So with the focus on UAM vertiports, what can you tell us about your vision for RAM vertiports?
Yeah, just to help those who don't understand. So the U stands for urban and the R stands for regional. Yeah, look, the policy support in Australia is very much around connecting regional communities, and I am leaning more towards the facilitating longer range services than jumping around on city rooftops, which is where people often think this industry is about Jetsons type jumping on city rooftops, and I think there may eventually be a place for that, particularly in cities that are very congested. I mean, if you go to Mumbai or LA, you can sit in a car for a long time, moving a very short distance. But I actually don't think Australia is congested enough in our cities to warrant it. That it will be just as quick in Melbourne or Sydney, to come out of an office and get in an Uber or a cab and go to the airport than find a vertiport and get there. So yes, the value add for the regional connectivity, I think, is going to be much greater. The problem we've got, though, is that most of the front running aircraft are fully electric, and that provides some limitations. You're talking 100 to 200 kilometers range, and then time spent charging batteries. So, and this is why I'm, pretty excited about our relationship with Electra Aero, because they're a hybrid aircraft. So they have an onboard charging system, as well as batteries, so they can fly. I've got a range of 1,000 kilometers. So I think they're not as sexy as the Jobies and Archers and that are out there about to come online, but I think they'll be a really good workhorse for and from a business perspective, probably easier to have a viable business model going longer distances. For the eVTOL fully battery aircraft, I think the early use cases will be focused around tourism, because people will pay more for a short tourist flight than they will for transport. And just as a quick aside, I started the first water taxi on the Yarra River 30 years ago, and spectacularly unsuccessful as a water taxi, because you could get a tram or a bus or drive cheaper and faster than going along the river, but very successful as for tourists and for romantic cruises and things like that. So I think that's where we'll see the higher value usage for these aircraft, where there's already established markets. And microflight helicopters and others, do tourism flights, out to a winery for lunch, and there's an established market there where people will pay higher prices for those one-off experiences. But no, I think the regional stuff is important, and where I think we can really come into providing a service for or an add-on for regional connectivity is, most regional aerodromes are, some kilometers out of a city center. So, you've got a problem if you get dropped in a regional community, and they might not even have a local Uber to pick you up and get you where you want to go. So, in terms of the regional role for Skyportz, when we talk to regional councils and things, it's like, well, we want to have a landing site that's right in the center of town, so that you don't need to get another form of transport to get into town. And so, yes, we're interested in the airport as a back of house facility where you might take an aircraft to charge it, but we want to have access, to drop people where they want to go.
Brilliant. So I know that you showed the guidelines and what the future will look like in Australia. Was Skyportz a key part of putting that together?
Well, look, there's a lot of people working on this industry, and both in government and in the private sector. I think I'm the only one who's been banging on about the need for vertiports in Australia for the last 5 years or so, and so I suppose in that sense I've taken a lead role on that, and serve on a lot of different committees at various levels of government and the bureaucracy, developing policies and things like that. So so yes, look, I suppose, yes, I have had a lot of involvement in this industry as it's sort of emerging, but I certainly wouldn't claim to be the only person that's been doing it.
Absolutely fair enough. And have you been able to speak to planning ministers in all states and federal ministers to amend the Planning Act?
Yeah, look, this is something, as I said, which frustrates me. I mean, I used to be on that side of the fence, and when you're a politician, you're generally looking for things that don't cost a huge amount of money but will have a big impact, and this is exactly what this is. So the short answer is yes, we have been doing our best to get before these decision makers and pursue our where we think what needs to happen. And in terms of success, I don't think I think there's still a feeling out there that this is still a long way in the future, and in one sense it probably is, in that it's still probably going to be a few years before we're starting to see aircraft in numbers starting to operate. But if you want to have a network of vertiports, even if I had planning approval to apply for one in a particular location, there's a process that you would have to go through to get approvals and then to actually build. So you're talking a few years down the track to do it. So my hope is that with the rapid developments now and release of papers such as the one today, that more and more people and politicians are realizing that, well, we need to get on board here. There are some amazing opportunities.
Yeah, 100%. So this one is a little bit of a complicated one, but at the moment, a lot of people are feeling like there's a lot of unwelcome noise pollution and issues with current traditional aircrafts due to poor regulatory environments and a lack of community licensing. And with the apparent surge in commercial drones, like what you were talking about before, there hasn't been a significant amount of community consultation or consideration. Do you have any insight as to whether or when the community consultation will actually begin?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And as I said, this is our biggest risk. If the community doesn't want it, it's not going to happen. So, uh, Google has done they've been doing drone deliveries now for some years, and they've got a lot of, they've done a really good job with their community consultation there and working through issues. For example, if somebody delivers their gets a coffee delivered at 10 o'clock every day, and the neighbor has to put up with a drone sort of flying over their house at the same time every day, then yeah, that is annoying. So what they do is they vary the route, so they make sure that the people aren't being impacted in a way which is unreasonable. I think it's all about being in a position that you're also benefiting. At the moment, when a helicopter flies overhead, it's some rich person who's got a holiday house where they're flying to avoid traffic, and there's no upside for most of us. It's so people they naturally say, well, what's in it for me to have this impost? But I think if you actually got the benefit of it yourself, it's a bit easier to accept from a community license perspective, that one day I might want to fly in that because I might want to be go to Geelong for the day from Melbourne, and that's going to be the most convenient way for me to do it. And I think it's also a matter of a gentle progression to just take baby steps to see whether we want this or not. And I think that it's a no-brainer that getting rid of helicopters and replacing them with quiet electric aircraft is going to be very positive for existing routes. So there's already aircraft that fly in and out of places on a regular basis, and this will be a significant improvement in people's lives because they won't have the same thump 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 of a helicopter. From there, we need to then have people saying, well, actually, I'm comfortable with that. I might not want it landing in front of my house, but I'm very happy for it to land at the Bunnings store down the road, and I know that once it gets to height, you're not going to hear it. I mean, they're talking 50 or 60 decibels once it's at height flying horizontally. So while you may see it in the sky, you won't actually hear it because it's basically gliding. There's very, very little propulsion required when it's flying horizontally. So from what I've seen, there is still noise taking off and landing because you're going vertically, but outside of that, you're very much not going to be noticing it. And look, I sort of look at, I live on a main road in Paran, and I've got buses and trams and cars and trucks all times of the day out front, and look, I don't notice it, and that's because I'm used to it, and I think similarly, when as our cities developed, and the car was developed, who would have thought that it would be acceptable to have all this noise and activity around you on the road? So I think it'll be a progression, and and it will live or die by the community wanting it. I think it will. There's no doubt it will happen in a limited way to replace helicopters. And as far as how far it goes is the gamble that I'm taking and that you'll be taking if you invest.
Absolutely fair enough. That's a good point about cars. I mean, yeah, you would never have thought if it went out to the community that people would approve of the noise of cars, but
Yeah.
here we are.
Yeah.
So what percentage of the AAM movements are expected to be freight as opposed to people in regards to the commercial vertiports versus people vertiports?
Oh, look, I think that'll very much depend on what the demand is, and look, we don't really know. And I suppose the demand will very much depend on the cost and where you can get the aircraft to. So, um, yeah, look, I couldn't really say, but I think there's, um, you know, we currently move goods by, motorbike and vans and trucks and things, and there's a need for that. If we can do that quicker, faster, more environmentally sustainably, move those goods, then I think there's a huge market for it. And I could easily see the situation where you've got distribution centers where you've got the option of, you can either put it in the van, or you can put it in the aircraft. And I think ultimately, you know, autonomous aircraft are going to be cheaper to move goods around than having a person stuck in traffic with a truck burning diesel. So it's going to take a bit of time, but I think that there will be a time when it will be the cheapest and the fastest and the best way to move goods. As far as people goes, there is already it's a bit of a different situation with people in that we're trying to create a new demand. So at the moment, you might not think of going to Geelong by air. So this is creating a new demand. So again, it's unknown. So I suppose, and it's not very financial or scientific. I'm working on the basis that these aircraft are going to be available to do all these things, and that there will be value in people will accept them, they'll want to do them, and they'll be the best way of doing things, whether it's moving people or goods. And for that to happen, we need to break that nexus between aviation and airports and have new landing sites. And if Skyportz has got those landing sites, then it's going to be hugely valuable. And yes, there's lots of consultants who take a stab at what the market's going to be worth. But the reality is, we don't really know. And this is why, as I said, this investment is it is speculative. It could be huge, but there are some hurdles still.
Absolutely. So I've just seen that somebody's asked about your revenue model, which will be explained in your offer document, which will go live next week when the offer goes live. In terms of your fundraising, I know that we've done a few fundraisers for you before via the Birchal platform. Is it looking like there will be another expected raise in the coming years?
Look, the aim of this business is really to create an exit opportunity for those who invest, and we're trying to create value, from a desktop. Really, we're not actually out there building stuff. We're trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together such that the investment will come in, and when it comes, it's going to be huge. I mean, to build the building behind me here, you're looking at probably $10 million. I'm not going to be raising $10 million on Birchal to build one vertiport. I'm going to need many hundreds of millions of dollars to build networks, and I think that it will be a case that there will be a much bigger investor will come in and probably take over this work. And while I can't make predictions under the ASIC rules, I would hope that at that point there'll be an opportunity for investors to exit or potentially even stay in with a much bigger investor that comes in and actually activates the work that we're doing. So this is very preparatory. I can't see, as far as Birchal raises go, or CSF raises go, it's not going to be an avenue where we will raise money to actually build things. So in this raise, where we haven't sort of finally set the maximum target, but we're hoping to have enough funds to keep doing what we're doing for the next few years. And if we're spending money on building prototype landing surfaces, which we might do in terms of in partnership with Swinburne University. We might burn through a little bit more money, but we're still going to keep it a lid on expenses. And we work with consultants who generally we don't pay them. We're all working together to try to create our niche so that we're ready to work together as a team when the time comes. So I think the when that big investment comes in, I don't know. I mean, I have discussions on a regular basis with venture capitalists and bigger funds who are interested in this. None of them have jumped at it yet, but they're all interested. So I think it'll very much depend on the aircraft actually arriving and being, and then people can see what they are. They can see the potential. They can see that Skyportz has got a map, roadmap lined up for activating sites. And I think if that happens, then the investment's likely to be a lot larger.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we've run out of time today. We've only got a few more questions, but please feel free to reach out to Clem via the Birchal profile or via his email. I think I've popped it in the chat a few times, actually.
Do you want to? I'll try to answer it in 1 or 2 sentences if you want to quickly run through the 3. And if I don't answer it adequately, please get in touch with me directly.
Beautiful. All right. So was the architect Patrick Schumacher?
No. Rafael Contreras is the architect.
There you go. What are your competitors in this space in Australia? It seems like the business model might be easily matchable, or am I misreading this? I think I know your key point of differences, Clem, actually.
Yeah. Look, there is no one else doing what Skyportz is doing. Our point of difference is we've been doing this for 5 years. We've got options on hundreds and hundreds of sites, and we're building other parts of the ecosystem as well, such as the airline to complement what we're doing. So I think it would be hard to quickly take over what we've been doing. I mean, and this is what stops me from setting up Skyportz in other markets, because I know that I've got a lifetime of working in Australia in politics, planning, tourism, property development, and I sort of know my way around probably as well as anybody else, and it's still hard. I wouldn't know where to start if I was to go to America and say, "Hey, I'm doing Skyportz here." I mean, I'd consider if there was a partner that wanted to take our brand, but and I think that's going to be the difficulty for competitors coming in from outside Australia, is not knowing the local market, and that's, I think, an advantage that we've got.
Fantastic. And I suspect this might be more of a comment than a question, but it speaks to amplifying the positive effects that vertiports will provide for emergency services to help get the community on board.
Yeah, look, that will be the first use cases that might be approved by CASA may be emergency uses, and that's what we found with drone deliveries. You couldn't fly over people and out of line of sight for a long time, and the first time that they did it was delivering life-saving devices by drone to people who are drowning. So yeah, CASA looks at the rewards versus the risks, and delivering a donut to somebody is not worth risking somebody's life with a drone dropping on their head, but delivering a life jacket to somebody drowning, it's worth the risk of flying over people on a beach. So yeah, I think that's where around the world, yeah, look, air ambulance is certainly an area where I think early approvals could be granted.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Clem. This has been super informative, and thank you everybody for your incredible questions. It's clear that everybody is super excited about this campaign, and particularly what Skyportz is bringing to the community. So thank you so much. And if anybody has any questions, please reach out to Birchal or Clem via the Birchal website. And we will also be sending around a recording in case you have missed anything. But thanks a lot, Clem.
Thanks, Emily.
Bye-bye.
Bye.